Hi, today I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of the French Quarter area of New Orleans. I grew up in the South, and I lived there until I was 53 years old. They say that New York is a state of mind. Well, in my opinion, the South is also a state of mind, and New Orleans is the greatest state of mind. I always tell people that if they plan to visit New Orleans, they need to get a passport because they have left the USA. I grew up close to the Mississippi River in what was cotton country at the time, but poverty has boarded shut the area where I grew up. I have lived in several places around the southern part of the Mississippi River, but I especially love the stretch of Old Muddy further south, from Natchez to New Orleans. The river road that leads into New Orleans is lined with old plantations. This yellow plantation home is at the Laura Plantation, which has been owned by African Americans and Creoles for hundreds of years. Here is a quote from the Laura.com website. 4 generations of Laura's family worked on this plantation. In her family were French aristocrats, war heroes, astute businesswomen, cousins who married cousins, slaveholders who were brutal as well as sensitive, hot-headed fire eaters, morose introverts, and farm managers, both competent and dissolute, all subjects in her memories and all living outside the American mainstream. See the full article at laura.com. When most people think of New Orleans, they visualize Bourbon Street and Mardi Gras, so we'll start there. In New Orleans, most of the heavy partying centers around Bourbon Street. New Orleans is situated on the Mississippi River down at the bottom of the state of Louisiana, which is at the bottom of the Mississippi River too. New Orleans is a place where the Mississippi River dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. At one time, the entire area of New Orleans was a swamp, and it was virtually uninhabitable. Because the French wanted to stake their claim on New Orleans, they shipped their prostitutes and criminals to settle it. I chuckle and say that those people are still settling New Orleans today. Bourbon Street is in a part of the French Quarter that is always wild, but the French Market and the Café du Monde are south and east of Bourbon Street, and they rest on the Mississippi River. The French Market of New Orleans is where you go to buy French coffee all along the river there. The Café du Monde is world famous for its chicory coffee and beignets, which are little squares of fried pastry that are sprinkled with powdered sugar. Oh my gosh, I'm making my own mouth water. I'd love to be sitting on a bench in the French Market, watching the boats pass on the Mississippi River and eating beignets. New Orleans is a city of ironwork and verandas and Spanish moss and courtyards. New Orleans is a crossroads. It reflects both its French and its Spanish roots, and it is where some of the wildest people in this country cross the paths with some of the most religious. It is a merger of the old and the new. New Orleans is a tribute to its past, some of it which is still fine and sophisticated. But some of the old, fine New Orleans is gone now, and there is but the seediness somehow seems to fit, especially back in the Atchafalaya Swamp, which is actually west of New Orleans. But remember, New Orleans is not entirely a brick and mortar place. New Orleans is more a state of mind. The Cajuns in the Atchafalaya Swamp play a large part of the myth that is woven around the city of New Orleans, and New Orleans itself was also a swamp. Just to the west of the French Quarter and around a bend of the Mississippi River, the Garden District of New Orleans is located, and it is elegant. When you are in the Garden District, it is difficult to realize that you are only a simple tram ride away from the bawdiness of Bourbon Street. I'll talk more about the Garden District in another post. New Orleans is a gateway to another way of life, or I should say to several other ways of life that seem to have been tossed into a big boiling pot of crawfish and corn on the cob and then turned out as one big buffet. Voodoo is still practiced in New Orleans. And music is as much a tributary of life in New Orleans as the river that runs through it. New Orleans is one of the few tropical parts of the United States, and the trees and the flowers bear witness to the long growing season there. This photo is from the Plantation home at Oak Alley. In New Orleans, flowers flourish that will not grow farther north. I miss my southern flowers. And alligators are quite at home around New Orleans. Remember, New Orleans was once a swamp. In Louisiana, live oaks with their long, crooked branches literally crawl across the ground, and Spanish moss weeps from their limbs. This is only part one of my virtual tour of New Orleans. I hope that you'll check back in a few days and catch the next parts of this in-depth look at a magnificent southern city, one that really is dear to my heart. My name is Jacki Kellum, and I essentially have 3 master's degrees in the arts and humanities. I've written and created visual art since I was a very young child, and I blog about a number of topics on several different blog sites. I lead a writers group in New Jersey, and I teach painting. I'm also an avid gardener. I hope that you'll browse through my categories and my YouTube playlists and see if I'm writing about anything that you enjoy. I hope that I'll see you again and again.